Hello and welcome to Hot Sheet Live. I'm Nancy Cordes. We're coming to you today from Manchester, New Hampshire, where we are covering the New Hampshire primaries coming up on Tuesday. And I'm joined to take a look back at this first real week of the nominating contest with John Dickerson, CBS political director, and Jan Crawford, CBS political correspondent. What a week, guys. John, first you, what did Iowa teach us?
Well, Iowa taught us two things. One, that you can come out of nowhere, you can be very far back in the polls, and that old-fashioned campaigning matters. That's the Rick Santorum story. It also taught us that Mitt Romney still has his issue. There's this anemic support for Mitt Romney. He barely got the vote he got last time in 2008. The Republican field lacks enthusiasm. There was a record number of voters, but barely a record, and certainly it was not the 140,000 that the governor of Iowa said it was going to be. And if you look at the percentage of Republicans who voted in Iowa, it's actually lower than the last time. So among Republicans, Rick Santorum actually beat Mitt Romney. But what we also learned is that while Mitt Romney may not have had the best night, he looks like he's going to have a good race. His two biggest challengers that could have come out of Iowa, that could have given him a long-term challenge, Newt Gingrich and Rick Perry, didn't do very well.
And isn't that the ironic thing about this race, Jan, is that on one hand, there's this assumption that Mitt Romney doesn't have very enthusiastic support from the Republican base, and that on the other hand, he's completely inevitable as the nominee.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, he did go into this conservative bastion, Iowa. I mean, it doesn't get much more, well, maybe my great home state of Alabama, and won. I mean, he, by 8 votes, maybe fewer, but he still, let's not lose sight of the fact that he did pull it together, make that final push, ran a very smart campaign, did a lot of volunteers, didn't spend that much time there, didn't spend as much money there as he did 4 years ago, and still managed to eke out a win, which of course he sees and his campaign sees as giving him that momentum to now go into New Hampshire, where of course he's got a commanding lead, and then beyond. He's already been down in South Carolina looking ahead a little bit. He's rolling out ads in Florida. All of this is building, and he's doing all of this because he has built this very, very strong campaign organization, and he's raised a lot of money. He is the only one of these candidates who can run this kind of national campaign at this point. It's going to be very hard to stop, and particularly if you're like Rick Santorum, who's run a bare bones. I mean, it's almost a study in contrast when you think about their campaigns and how they've been campaigning and their stance on the issues.
That's right.
One thing I've been surprised about is that despite his really strong showing in Iowa, Rick Santorum barely moved the needle here in New Hampshire. I think he got maybe a 2-point bump.
He's going up now, though. I mean, he's broke through. I mean, the daily tracking polls show him he's gone up about 2 to 3 points every one that's come out. He's at 11 now.
Okay.
Right. Still a vast distance between
Romney at 41.
Right.
Yeah.
And New Hampshire voters are notorious for basically not giving a darn what happened.
Oh, that's
in Iowa. In fact, Dave Weigel at Slate wrote a piece and ran into a guy who said, "I like that guy who won in Ohio or wherever it was." They don't, they're not paying a lot of attention to Iowa, and to the extent they do, they want to change the result that happened in Iowa. So,
right.
And also, of course, has been much discussed, the social conservatives who gave Santorum his surge in Iowa, they don't play as big a role here in New Hampshire.
One of the other big changes we saw this week, of course, was the transition from nice Newt to not so nice Newt. He's going after Mitt Romney, new ads, calling him timid. He's calling Rick Santorum a junior partner. So is this official? He now no longer believes in positive campaigns?
Well, he better change something, because the negative campaign that was run against him totally devastated him in Iowa, and also then caused him to make a bunch of unforced errors that hurt him here in New Hampshire. As the Romney folks point out, they have a tiny bit of a case. They say, well, it wasn't just the negative ads, because yes, there were a lot of negative ads against Gingrich in Iowa, but there weren't any in New Hampshire, and Gingrich dropped from 26 in the polls down now to about 9. Mm-hmm. So Gingrich helped himself in terms of hurting his campaign, but he could be a lot meaner. Saying that Mitt Romney is timid is hardly. I mean, that's.
But he did call him a liar.
That's different. But my point is, if you're gonna go, he did indeed call him a liar. Of course, he was that. When you're responding to a question is one thing. When you're making an ad, it shows how far you're willing to go, and he's not willing to go that far by calling him timid. Now, on the Sean Hannity show after the Iowa results, Gingrich was much more forceful than he has been in his ads. And the point here is that this is the problem: is he doesn't know which one he's going to be, and then if he doesn't figure that out, you're going to have an election before he can figure it out.
The Boston Globe has just come out with an endorsement, a bit of a surprise. It endorsed John Huntsman, who of course has been up here in New Hampshire the whole time, kind of all by his lonesome, making his last stand. And I want to read to you what the Boston Globe said, because of course you would assume that it would endorse Mitt Romney, who was the governor of Massachusetts. While Romney proceeds cautiously, strategically, trying to appease enough constituencies to get himself the nomination, Huntsman has been bold, the editorial goes. Rather than merely sketch out policies, he articulates goals and ideals. And it goes on to say that his credentials make him best prepared to be president. It's kind of a finger in the eye.
The Globe didn't endorse Romney 4 years ago, and I mean, I hate to, being a former print reporter myself, of course, newspapers are important, but editorial page endorsements from liberal newspapers do not affect how Republican primary voters are going to, I mean, obviously, if you've got some Democrats out there who are going to vote in the Republican primary, they might think, hey, that's really interesting, but that to me is just inconsequential.
Well, that's right. If there is one editorial endorsement that matters in New Hampshire, it's the union leader. Newt Gingrich got that. Right. And it didn't present a shield that could protect him from himself or the negative ads. So the most important endorsement didn't even help Gingrich. So this one isn't going to help Huntsman.
Let's look ahead to South Carolina. Is there anybody there who can stop Mitt Romney's momentum? We haven't seen any polling in South Carolina in a couple of weeks, so we don't really know how the results in Iowa really affected voters there. Can anyone stop Mitt Romney when you've still got such a fractured field of social conservatives kind of, picking off pieces of the social conservative and Tea Party vote?
Well, Mitt Romney can stop his own momentum. I mean, part of the challenge for him in South Carolina is, does he have the kind of ceiling there that he had in Iowa? No matter what he tried to do in Iowa, he couldn't get above, he couldn't break into that conservative vote. That's a bit of a problem in Republican politics because conservatives are the heart of your party, the bigger heart than in the Democratic Party with liberals. So, but as you quite rightly point out, he may not be able to get above his ceiling, but the vote is going to be split there between Perry and Santorum and Gingrich. So there is no one anti-Romney candidate, and if those guys split the vote and Romney is able to get the moderates, there are moderates in South Carolina, or national security conservatives who like him, or economic conservatives, he could win in South Carolina.
And he's going to get a boost, I think, by having John McCain come down. I mean, obviously McCain won there 4 years ago, but what I find so interesting too is, not to go back to Iowa, that may now seem like a lifetime ago, but obviously that was good news for Romney there. They had that momentum. But another good thing that happened for Mitt Romney is that Rick Perry, after that kind of bizarre and rambling speech he gave on election night, woke up the next morning, went for a run, and tweeted that he was staying in the race. So that will, as you're talking about, continue to keep that vote split. Now, what we're starting to hear, and what I'm starting to pick up from conservatives who are very anti-Romney, they're starting to panic because it looks like he is going to be the nominee, and what can we do? And you're starting to hear this talk about, well, what if we just all got together and picked one? The voters can't pick one, so what if the candidates, let's just have somebody, we're going to decide someone's going to be the nominee, the anti-Romney, but now which one of these guys is going to take one for the team? I don't see Perry dropping out and saying Newt should be the nominee. I don't see Newt dropping out and saying, so it's going to remain undecided.
Normally, if you run for president, you're a slightly competitive person.
Right, and also this theory has undergirding it this kind of silly notion, which is that if all these people got into a room somewhere and picked who it's going to be, that the voters would then pay any attention to them.
Right.
These are the voters whose key view in life is, we're going to make up our own mind, don't let the establishment tell us what to do. And so they're not likely to suddenly listen to the or see the white smoke and decide, okay, it's Rick Santorum, to keep my Catholic metaphors all in line.
And then moving on from South Carolina, we go to Florida next, which seems like it would be very fertile ground for someone like Mitt Romney.
Especially because he's got the money. It's a state where you have to, advertisements are expensive. You have to run ads because you can't go door to door, or you can go door to door just for the theater of it. And then also there's an absentee ballot system in Florida that if you have a lot of money and organization, you can work it. Make sure your voters vote, and that's something he can do and no other candidate can do.
Right, and he's already rolling out ads there as we speak, getting a head start. So if he gets through South Carolina, I mean, this race may not be quite as interesting come March as some people are saying.
His whole basis for his campaign is that I would do a better job with the economy than the president has been doing. If the economy continues to make these slight improvements over the next few months, what then becomes the rationale for his campaign?
It will have to improve dramatically tomorrow. We're getting to a point now where voters, that narrative is going to be fixed, and voters are already going to say, it's just not my CDs are in my life is just not as good as it was 4 years ago. So the economy and jobs, I think, still is going to be the salient issue that he will be able to use against Barack Obama in November if he's the nominee or whoever the Republican nominee is.
I think that's right. And then one thing we just have to keep our eye on is the Republican base is very motivated to beat Barack Obama, but we have seen this kind of weak enthusiasm among Republicans. So if Romney's the nominee and people are not ecstatic about him, does that even matter? Because they were ecstatic about beating Barack Obama.
Right.
So we'll see if that's the case.
Right.
They weren't so ecstatic about beating Barack Obama that it got them to turn out in the Iowa caucus, but that may not be an important number.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to, I think conservatives, Republicans are the eye on the prize, and that's getting Barack Obama out of the White House. And while, sure, we're not so happy with this field right now, some people are saying, come November, they are going to be motivated right now to turn out.
All right, let's just wrap this thing up with predictions for New Hampshire. I know your favorite, right? You think that Mitt Romney is going to run away with this thing with 30 points, or is it going to tighten in the end?
Oh, it'll tighten. 30 points? Let's see. Probably not 30 points.
Okay,
but
20
he'll do,
points, right?
I'd say, mid-teens, maybe mid-high teens for Romney.
I could see him breaking 20, a 20 point. I mean, if you look back 4 years ago and look at what McCain and Romney got, put those together, you could have a pretty commanding lead, even if Santorum continues to rise. But of course, anything can happen, and we've got 2 debates between now and Tuesday.
That's right. That's right.
That's right. Another moment for, as Jan's been pointing out for a while, another moment for Newt Gingrich, who has shined at these debates. That's a chance for him to come back and show his stuff.
Yeah, he hadn't had one for a while, so look what happened. He's going down.
If anything, this
other than morning debates with Nancy.
Yeah, that's right. That really woke me up this morning. But if anything, this campaign has been volatile. So 20 points can disappear like that. Jan Crawford, our political correspondent, John Dickerson, our
director.
Blonde guy in the chair.
Yeah, who does everything.
So many titles. John Dickerson, our political director, our boss, right? I should have just said our boss. Thank you both so much for being here on Hot Sheet Live. And thank you for joining us. You can catch us all the time on CBSNews.com. See you later.